Greetings, one and all, once again back to Exploring Arda, a Tolkien-centered podcast where I am your host, Jackson, and I go through a bunch of Tolkien's works other than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So it's been like almost probably a month since I was last into the story of Children of Húrin. So this is the continuing current book that I'm reading. Obviously, I've read through it in the Silmarillion, but of course, they made the book and all that stuff, which is, obviously why you guys are here. So, and it has been like a month since I've last recorded one of these, and so I'm trying to kind of gather my thoughts of what's happened. So obviously, Húrin shared some words with Morgoth, and pretty much that's where Morgoth curses Húrin's bloodline, and yeah, that's pretty much, and that's also after the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. So, a lot of bad things happen, obviously. And so that's kind of where we are right now with Chapter 4, The Departure of Túrin. So I think we should just get right into it without any introductions, because I'll just do that at the end. So, here we go. The Departure of Túrin. To Brethil, 3 men only found their way back at last through Tar Nufuin, an evil road. And when Glorindel, Hador's daughter, learned of the fall of Haldir, she grieved and died. To Dor-lómin no tidings came. Rhiann, wife of Huor, fled into the wild, distraught, but she was aided by the grey elves of Mithrim, and when her child Tuor was born, they fostered him. But Rhiann went to the Hod in Doriath, and laid herself down there, and died. Morwen Eladwin remained in Hithlum, silent in grief. Her son Túrin was only in his 9th year, and she was again with child. Her days were evil. The Easterlings came into the land in great numbers, and they dealt cruelly with the people of Hador, and robbed them of all that they possessed, and enslaved them. All the people of Húrin's homelands that could work or serve any purpose they took away, even the young girls and boys, and the old they killed or drove out to starve. But they dared not yet lay hands on the lady of Dor-lómin, or thrust her from her house, for the word ran among them that she was perilous, and a witch, who had dealings with the white fiends, for so they named the elves, hating them but fearing them more. For this reason they also feared and avoided the mountains, in which many of the Eldar had taken refuge, especially in the south of the land, and after plundering and harrying, the Easterlings drew back northward. For Húrin's house stood in the southeast of Dor-lómin, and the mountains were near. Nen Lalaith indeed came down from a spring under the shadow of Amon Darthir, over whose shoulder there was a steep pass. By this the hardy could cross arid Wethrin, and come down by the wells of Lithuai into Beleriand. But this was not known to the Easterlings, nor to Morgoth yet, for all that country, while the house of Fingolfin stood, was secure from him, and none of his servants had ever come there. He trusted that Aerin Wethrin was a wall insurmountable, both against escape from the north and against assault from the south, and there was indeed no other pass for the unwinged between Serich and far westward where Dor-lómin marched with Nevras. Thus it came to pass that after the first inroads, Morwen was let be, though there were men that lurked in the woods about, and it was perilous to stir far abroad. There still remained under Morwen's shelter Sador the Woodwright, and a few old men and women, and Túrin, whom she kept close within the garth. But the homestead of Húrin soon fell into decay, and though Morwen labored hard, she was poor, and would have gone hungry but for the help that was sent to her secretly by Aerin, Húrin's kinswoman. For a certain Brada, one of the Easterlings, had taken her forced to be his wife. Alms were bitter to Morwen, but she took this aid for the sake of Túrin and her unborn child, and because, as she said, it came of her own. For it was this Brada who had seized the people, the goods, and the cattle of Húrin's homelands, and carried them off to his own dwellings. He was a bold man, but of small account among his own people before they came to Hithlum, and so, seeking wealth, he was ready to hold lands that others of his sort did not covet. Morwen he had once seen when he rode to her house on a foray, but a great dread of her had seized him. He thought that he looked in the fell eyes of a white fiend, and he was filled with a mortal fear lest some evil should overtake him. And he did not ransack her house, nor discover Túrin, else the life of the heir of the true lord would have been short. And I'll actually do a quick break here. So, a lot of death. A lot of death. Obviously, this is still in the wars of Beleriand, so of course there is going to be a lot of death. So, right away, there's Glorindel, Hador's daughter, pretty much learning that of Haldur's death. She pretty much dies, I guess, out of depression, because it just says she grieves and dies, so it's like it's just very quick. And then pretty much like the same thing with Rion, the wife of Huar, and she pretty much went down to the Nernieth and pretty much died there, probably out of the same thing. I mean, most likely out of starvation. But at that point, if you just go there and then just die, it's like, well, she was super depressed and obviously starving, probably, but who knows? And then back in Dor-lómin, obviously Morwen stays there with Túrin, and the Easterlings come over and invade their place and plunder and pillage and all that, nasty, evil stuff. And yeah, so, and then with the whole rumors of Morwen being a witch and evil, I guess ends up saving Túrin and Morwen and her unborn child. So it's crazy how like rumors kind of like that just save people. So I just thought it was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's a lot of darkness, a lot of despair, a lot of death. So not the greatest time. So I think we'll be. Oh yeah, and then Brada obviously is one of the Easterlings here that is pretty much stays in Dor-lómin, from what I gather. So back to it again. Brada made thralls of the straw heads, as he named the people of Hador, and set them to build him a wooden hall in the land to the northward of Húrin's house. And within a stockade his slaves were herded like cattle in a byre, but were ill guarded. Among them some could still be found uncowed and ready to help the Lady of Dor-lómin, even at their peril. And from them came secretly tidings of the land to Morwen, though there was little hope in the news that they brought. But Brada took Éireann as a wife, and not a slave, for there were few women amongst his own following, and none to compare with the daughters of the Edain. And he hoped to make himself a lordship in that country, and have an heir to hold it after him. Of what had happened, and of what might happen in the days to come, Morwen said little to Túrin, and he feared to break her silence with questions. When the Easterlings first came into Dor-lómin, he said to his mother, "When will my father come back, to cast out these ugly thieves? Why does he not come?" Morwen answered, "I do not know. It may be that he was slain, or that he is held captive. Or again, it may be that he was driven far away, and cannot yet return through the foes that surround us." "Then I think that he is dead," said Túrin, and before his mother he restrained his tears, for no one could keep him from coming back to help us, if he were alive. "I do not think that either of those things are true, my son," said Morwen. As the time lengthened, the heart of Morwen grew darker for her son Túrin, heir of Dor-lómin and Ladros, for she could see no hope for him better than to become a slave of the Easterling men before he was much older. Therefore she remembered her words with Húrin, and her thought turned again to Doriath, and she resolved at last, to send Túrin away in secret, if she could, and to beg King Thingol to harbor him. And as she sat and pondered how this might be done, she heard clearly in her thought the voice of Húrin say to her, "Go swiftly, do not wait for me." But the birth of her child was drawing near, and the road would be hard and perilous. The more that went, the less the hope of escape. And her heart still cheated her with hope unadmitted. Her inmost thought foreboded that Húrin was not dead, and she listened for his footfall in the sleepless nights of the watch, or would wake, thinking that she heard in the courtyard the neigh of Arach, his horse. Moreover, though she was willing that her son should be fostered in the halls of another, after the manner of that time, she would not yet humble her pride to be an alms-guest, not even of a king. Therefore the voice of Húrin, or the memory of his voice, was denied, and the first strand of the fate of Túrin was woven. Autumn of the year of lamentation was drawing on before Morwen came to this resolve, and then she was in haste, for the time of journeying was short, but she dreaded that Túrin would be taken if she waited over winter. Easterlings were prowling around the garth and spying on the house. Therefore she said suddenly to Túrin, "Your father does not come, so you must go, and soon. It is as he would wish." "Go?" cried Túrin. "Whither shall we go? Over the mountains?" "Yes," said Morwen, "over the mountains, away south. South, that way some hope may lie. But I did not say we, my son. You must go, but I must stay." "I cannot go alone," said Túrin. "I will not leave you. Why should we not go together?" "I cannot go," said Morwen. "But you will not go alone. I shall send Gethron with you, and Grithnir too, perhaps." "Will you not send Labadel?" said Túrin. "No, for Saeros is lame," said Morwen, "and it will be a hard road. And since you are my son and the days are grim, I will not speak softly. You may die on that road. The year is getting late, but if you stay, you will come to a worse end, to be a thrall. If you wish to be a man when you come to a man's age, you will do as I bid, bravely. But I shall leave you only with Sador, and blind Ragnar, and the old women, said Túrin. Did not my father say that I am the heir of Hador? The heir should stay in Hador's house to defend it. Now I wish I still had my knife. The heir should stay, but he cannot, said Morwen. But he may return one day. Now take heart. I will follow you if things grow worse, if I can. But how will you find me, lost in the wild, said Túrin, and suddenly his heart failed him, and he wept openly. If you wail, other things will find you first, said Morwen. But I know whither you are going, and if you come there, and if you remain there, there I will find you if I can. For I am sending you to King Thingol in Doriath. Would you rather be a king's guest than a thrall? I do not know, said Túrin. I do not know what a thrall is. I am sending you away so that you need not learn it, Morwen answered. Then she set Túrin before her and looked into his eyes, as if she were trying to read some riddle there. It is hard, Túrin, my son, she said at length. Not hard for you only. It is heavy on me in evil days to judge what is best to do. But I do as I think right, for why else should I part with the thing most dear that is left to me? They spoke no more of this together, and Túrin was grieved and bewildered. In the morning he went to find Sador, who had been hewing sticks for firing, of which they had little, for they dared not stray out in the woods, and now he leant on his crutch, and looked at the great chair of Húrin, which had been thrust unfinished in a corner. It must go, he said, for only bare needs can be served in these days. Do not break it yet, said Túrin. Maybe he will come home, and then it will please him to see that you have done for him while he was away. False hopes are more dangerous than fears, said Sador, and they will not keep us warm this winter. He fingered the carving of the chair and sighed. I wasted my time, he said, though the hours seem pleasant, but all such things are short-lived, and the joy in making is their only true end, I guess. And now I might as well give you back your gift. Túrin put out his hand and quickly withdrew it. A man does not take back his gifts, he said. But if it is my own, may I not give it as I will, said Sador. Yes, said Túrin, but to any man but me. But why should you wish to give it? I have no hope of using it for worthy tasks, Sador said. There will be no work for Labadel in days to come but thrall work. What is a thrall? Said Túrin. A man who was a man, but is treated as a beast, Sador answered. Fed only to keep alive, kept alive only to toil, toiling only for fear of pain or death. And from these robbers he may get pain or death just for their sport. I hear that they pick some of the fleet-footed and hunt them with hounds. They have learned quicker from the orcs than we have learned from the fair folk. Now I understand things better, said Túrin. It is a shame that you should have to understand such things so soon, said Sador, then seeing the strange look on Túrin's face. What do you understand now? Why my mother is sending me away, said Túrin, and tears filled his eyes. Ah, said Sador, and he muttered to himself. But why so long delayed? Then turning to Túrin, he said, That does not seem news for tears to me, but you should not speak your mother's counsels aloud to Labadel, or to anyone. All walls and fences have ears these days, ears that do not grow on fair heads. But I must speak with someone, said Túrin. I have always told things to you. I do not want to leave you, Labadel. I do not want to leave this house, or my mother. But if you do not, said Sador, soon there will be an end of the house of Hador forever, as you must understand now. Labadel does not want you to go, but Sador, her servant of Húrin, will be happier when Húrin's son is out of the reach of the Easterlings. Well, it cannot be helped. We must say farewell. Now will you not take my knife as a parting gift? No, said Túrin. I am going to the elves, to the king of Doriath, my mother says. There I may get other things like it. But I shall not be able to send you any gifts, Labadel. I shall be far away and all alone. Then Túrin wept, but Sador said to him, Hey now, where is Húrin's son? For I heard him say not long ago, I shall go as a soldier with an elf king, as soon as I am able. Then Túrin stayed his tears and said, Very well. If those were the words of the son of Húrin, he must keep them and go. But whenever I say that I will do this or that, it looks very different when the time comes. Now I am unwilling. I must take care not to say such things again. It would be best indeed, said Sador, so must men teach, and few men learn, lest the unseen days be. Today is more than enough. And I'll do a quick break here. So obviously Túrin doesn't want to leave, and he has no idea what a thrall is until, obviously, Labadel here explains it, which makes sense because Labadel's kind of been there for him, like to explain things that obviously his father's not there to teach him about, so he's I guess like Lavadell's kind of like the father figure, kind of. I guess I would consider him. Wow, can't talk. Consider him a father figure. There you go. But yeah, Morwen's pretty much just like, hey, listen, like you got to go, but I can't because of obvious things, and then the whole thing too of like Túrin leaving because he is the House of Hador, and like the whole thing of like staying there would just mean he's just going to be right into the thralls of the Easterlings. So I guess it makes sense, for Morwen to send him out away from a harsh life like that. So, but yeah, and then he kind of like accepts it, and he's like, okay, and that's where we are, and now we're gonna go back into the story. Now Túrin was made ready for the journey, and he bade farewell to his mother, and departed in secret with his 2 companions. But when they bade Túrin turn and look back upon the house of his father, then the anguish of parting smote him like a sword, and cried, Morwen, Morwen, when shall I see you again? But Morwen, standing on the threshold, heard the echo of that cry in the wooded hills, and she clutched the post of the door so that her fingers were torn. This was the first of the sorrows of Túrin. Early in the year after Túrin was gone, Morwen gave birth to a child, and she named her Nienor, which is mourning. But Túrin was already far away when she was born. Long and evil was his road, for the power of Morgoth was ranging far abroad. But he had as guides Gethron and Grithnir, who had been young in the days of Hador, and though they were now aged, they were valiant, and they knew well the lands, for they had journeyed often through Beleriand in former times. Thus by fate and courage they passed over the shadowy mountains, and coming down into the vale of Sirion, they passed into the forest of Brethil, and at last, weary and haggard, they reached the confines of Doriath. But there they became bewildered, and were enmeshed in the mazes of the Queen, and wandered lost amid the pathless trees, until all their food was spent. There they came near to death, for winter came cold from the north, but not so light was Túrin's doom. Even as they lay in despair, they heard a horn sounded. Beleg, the strongbow, was hunting in that region, for he dwelt ever for the marches of Doriath, and he was the greatest woodsman of those days. He heard their cries and came to them, and when he had given them food and drink, he learned their names and whence they came, and he was filled with wonder and pity. And he looked with liking upon Túrin, for he had the beauty of his mother in the eyes of his father, and he was sturdy and strong. What boon would you have of King Thingol? Said Beleg to the boy. I would be one of his knights, to ride against Morgoth, and avenge my father, said Túrin. That may well be, when the years have increased you, said Beleg. For though you are yet small, you have the makings of a valiant man, worthy to be a son of Húrin the Steadfast, if that were possible. For the name of Húrin was held in honor in all the lands of the elves. Therefore Beleg gladly became the guide of the wanderers, and he led them to a lodge where he dwelt at that time with other hunters, and there they were housed while a messenger went to Menegroth. When word came back that Thingol and Melian would receive the son of Húrin and his guardians, Beleg led them by secret ways into the hidden kingdom. Thus Túrin came to the great bridge over the Escalduin, and passed the gates of Thingol's halls, and as a child he gazed upon the marvels of Menegroth, which no mortal man before had seen, save Beren only. Then Gethron spoke the message of Morwen before Thingol and Melian, and Thingol received them kindly, and set Túrin upon his knee in honor of Húrin, mightiest of men, and of Beren his kinsman. And those that saw this marveled, for it was a sign that Thingol took Túrin as his foster son, and that was not at that time done by kings, nor ever again by elf lord to a man. Then Thingol said to him, Here, son of Húrin, shall your home be, and in all your life you shall be held as my son, man though you may be. Wisdom shall be given you beyond the measure of mortal men, and the weapons of the elves shall be set in your hands. Perhaps the time may come when you shall regain the lands of your father in Hithlum, but dwell now here in love. And I'll do a quick break before, I think, okay. A couple more pages and we'll be done. So now they are in Doriath. So now they've made it to the safe haven of Thingol and Melian. And yeah, he pretty much takes Túrin as his foster son, which obviously, as I just read, doesn't happen a lot. And especially with like the elves and mankind, because they kind of get along, but it's not like the best. And especially it's King Thingol too, so it's like kind of surprising that he actually does take Túrin as a foster son, even with the whole story of Beren. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. But obviously, yeah, he goes out into the wild. They barely survive. They're on the brink of death, and then hey, there you go. Beleg Strongbow comes in and saves the day and brings them over to Doriath, and all is good again. So, so the first stage of his journey is a little rough, but he's also still like considered a child. So, I guess it only makes sense. But yeah, and now we are pretty much in Doriath here. And I think I'm just going to end up reading the whole rest of the chapter. It's only a couple pages, so here we go once more. Thus began the sojourn of Túrin in Doriath. With him remained for a while Gethron and Grythnir his guardians, though they yearned to return again to their lady in Dor-lómin. Then age and sickness came upon Grythnir, and he stayed beside Túrin until he died. But Gethron departed, and Thingol sent with them an escort to guide him and guard him, and they brought words from Thingol to Morwen. They came at last to Húrin's house, and when Morwen learned that Túrin was received with honor in the halls of Thingol, her grief was lightened. And the elves brought also rich gifts from Melian, and a message bidding her return with Thingol's folk to Doriath. But for Melian was wise and foresighted, and she hoped thus to avert the evil that was prepared in the thought of Morgoth. But Morwen would not depart from her house, for her heart was yet unchanged and her pride still high. Moreover, Nienor was a babe in her arms. Therefore she dismissed the elves of Doriath with her thanks, and gave them in gift the last small things of gold that remained to her, concealing her poverty, and she bade them take back to Thingol the helm of Hador. But Túrin watched ever for the return of Thingol's messengers, and when they came back alone, he fled into the woods and wept, for he knew of Melian's bidding, and he had hoped that Morwen would come. This was the second sorrow of Túrin. When the messengers spoke Morwen's answer, Melian was moved with pity, perceiving her mind, and she saw that the fate which she foreboded could not lightly be set aside. The helm of Hador was given into Thingol's hands. That helm was made of grey steel adorned with gold, and on it were graven runes of victory. A power was in it that guarded any who wore it from wound or death, for the sword that hewed it was broken, and the dart that smote it sprang aside. It was wrought by Telchar, the smith of Nogrod, whose works were renowned. It had a visor, after the manner of those that the dwarves used in their forges for their shieldings of their eyes, and the face of one that wore it struck fear into the hearts of all beholders, but was itself guarded from dart and fire. Upon its crest was set in defiance a gilded image of Glaurung the dragon, for it had been made soon after he first issued from the gates of Morgoth. Often Hador, and Galar after him, had borne it in war, and the hearts of the hosts of Hithlum were uplifted when they saw it towering high amid the battle, and they cried, "Of more worth is the dragon of Dor-lómin than the gold worm of Angband." But Húrin did not wear the dragon helm with ease, and in any case he would not use it, for he said, "I would rather look on my foes with my true face." Nonetheless, he accounted the helm among the greatest heirlooms of his house. Now Thingol had in Menegroth deep armories, filled with great wealth of weapons, metal wrought with fish's mail, and shining like water in the moon. Swords and axes, shields and helms, wrought by Telchar himself, or by his master Gamil Zarak the Old, or by elven wrights more skilful still. For some things he had received in gift that came out of Valinor, and were wrought by Feanor in his mastery, than whom no craftsman was greater in all the days of the world. Yet Thingol handled the helm of Hador as though his hoard were scanty, and he spoke courteous words, saying, "Proud were the head that bore this helm, which the sires of Húrin bore." Then a thought came to him, and he summoned Túrin, and told him that Morwen had sent her son a mighty thing, the heirloom of his fathers. "Take now the dragon head of the north," he said, "and when the time comes, wear it well." But Túrin was yet too young to lift the helm, and he heeded it not because of the sorrow of his heart. All right, and that's pretty much the end of the chapter, and I'll probably actually end it here. It'll be a quick chapter, obviously, but just because I wouldn't have I don't have enough time to really do the next chapter, which is Túrin in Doriath, which is basically like 20-something pages. But yeah, I mean, we got a good start to the story so far, and that's kind of like what matters for me. But I guess just to kind of like recap and everything is that Morwen is still staying in Dor-lómin. She still, I guess, has a little bit of hope that that Húrin will come back, but then also at the same time she's like, well, she knows the roads are bad, she's not going to risk it with the baby. So I guess that kind of makes sense as well, even though like the host of Doriath came in and they're like, hey, you just come with us, it's fine. And she's like, nah, just send this helmet instead. So to put it really simply. And yeah, Thingol kind of like takes it and he's just like, oh, this is like a really nice item. And pretty much gives it over to Túrin because he's the heir of the House of Hador. So, and obviously since he's still a child, he accepts it, but like he's like, he can't use it yet. So, but yeah, now he's pretty much in Doriath. Oh yeah, and then Nienor is born obviously with Morwen, who later comes into the story with wild things that happen later on, if I remember correctly, with Nienor. So, but yeah, I think that is everything I have for this chapter. I guess just to say that thanks for watching my channel and checking it all out. I know that a lot of you guys listen and watch to Grim Captivation, which is my paranormal podcast. So I greatly appreciate you guys kind of checking all that stuff out. And I know that a lot of the paranormal, supernatural, darker things always kind of like attract this like esoteric captivation, I guess you could say, the lure of the dark. So I guess it makes sense that a lot of you guys are kind of there for that. So I'm glad you guys have checked it out. Also, be sure to check out my own fantasy book called The Lands of Ordia, Power of Heaven. It is on Amazon, but I've decided to pretty much take a step back before writing anything else and kind of like finish like the history of my story, which is kind of like the main series is in a third age, and so I decided to go back and kind of polish up the history. So I've been doing that recently. So the second book, don't know when it's going to come out. It's going to be a while, but it is what it is. So. And then I guess like the last thing is that with my traversing through Terra, I only have a few of those, and I haven't really had much time to go outside and record any of those, so I might not be recording any of those anytime soon. So just be sure to check out Grim Captivation and my book. So I think with all that being said, just stay tuned for another episode, and may the light of Elbreth be with you all. Farewell.